Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream. This is the 32nd live stream that we've done, and really appreciate everybody joining. A couple of quick housekeeping things that I like to do at the beginning. Thanks to everybody who's here live. Remember, if you do have any questions or comments, then leave those in the chat. Now, point over here, I realized looking backwards afterwards that if you're watching this on a desktop, that makes perfect sense because all the comments are appearing over there. But if you're watching this perhaps on your tablet or on a phone, I think you comment somewhere else, but I'm sure you'll figure that all out. So if you're watching this afterwards, remember the whole thing is driven by what you who are here live. If you're watching this afterwards, really appreciate that very much. Remember, you can skip forward. And the people watching it afterwards do have a real love-hate with it. A lot of people watch it. I get lots of comments afterwards. Some people don't like the live streams, but hopefully they'll stick with it. So if you don't know me, although I think you probably do, although I get quite a few people subscribing to the channel from the live streams. So I'm Gary Bembridge, and the channel is Tips for Travelers, and my goal is to make it more fun, make it even easier to discover, plan, and have unforgettable cruise vacations. So let's get straight into it. There's a couple of questions popping up, and I'll try and address those first. But I'll start actually with one thing which sort of links into a little bit that I was going to talk about anyway, and I'll bring that up in 2 seconds here. And I've seen some other comments. Here we go, Francis. Francis, thanks for joining again. There's lots of regular people joining, which is great to see, and I'll come to you shortly. So Francis saying, hello all, so sad that Kiwi's first 3 cruises cancelled due to COVID amongst the crew. So you're right, Francis, I actually think it's 5, but you're right, it might be 3. They basically cancelled all their startup cruises, which were due to start on the 17th. I was due to go on the 23rd, as were Kirsty and Co, who are there a little bit later. And they've basically cancelled the short ones. And I think they're starting now, if I remember correctly, it's on the 12th or something of August with the slightly longer ones. The reason for that is an outbreak of COVID on the ship, which of course they have to work through. They also were not allowed to bring any more crew on board until that was under control. So they couldn't basically get the crew on ready to sail. So I think it's really important, I guess, as I've said many, many times on the live streams, in the videos, I often get a lot of people criticizing me for it. But you need to remember that what I guess we've all learned is even though cruising is starting up again, this virus is very unpredictable. We've got these variants kicking around. We've got countries getting skittish, closing borders, opening borders. So we should constantly expect things to chop and change. So far, touch wood, the cruises that have been going in the UK, despite the very fast growth of the Delta variant, hasn't disrupted any actual live cruises, and hopefully it stays that way. It's interesting about the point about cancellations, building on from Francis' point, is in the space of 24 hours, I actually had 2 cruises cancelled. I had the Queen Elizabeth cancelled, and also I had the Valiant Lady in January cancelled. And the reason for that is, as Virgin kind of figure out where they're going to sail, where demand's going to be, what's going to be easiest to get going, they have basically cancelled the Valiant Caribbean season. They're now moving the ship, and they're going to be sailing out of the UK, out of Portsmouth, which is where Scarlet Lady is going to be sailing out. They're going to be running a series of short 4-nighters, which is probably quite clever. I think it's 4 or 5 of those short 4-nighters they're going to be running to basically get more and more people to try the Virgin product out of the UK. They're then going to run 11-night and 12-night cruises, which some go down to the Canary Islands, and some are doing sort of Portugal and Spain. So anyway, I had that cancelled. So again, in the space of 24 hours, remember that things are still really much in a state of flux. It's a real pity, actually, that the Queen Elizabeth one had got cancelled, not only because I was looking forward to it, my partner Mark, it was the only one of these that he's doing, but also I'd written a series of videos which were linked to the various ships that are going on. So now my whole section about Queen Elizabeth, I have to madly rethink. So Andy and Kirsty, they were, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, they were due to be on the same Queen Elizabeth cruise as I was. So was cruising with Amber, who may or may not join this. So it's a pity we're not going to meet. And so it's great to know that you've booked the December Northern Europe cruises place. So that's great. That's an even longer cruise, which is fantastic. The challenge I've got is what I have done largely because I couldn't do anything else, but I've actually booked, because of all the various onboard credit I've got, I've actually booked another Cunard trip, but right later into next year, right towards, I think it's about October-y time, booked that. So anyway. So let's go right back. There was a question which I saw just before we started, which is which I do know the answer to, which is JM129. Great to see you here again. And I always joke that you ask challenging questions, which is always great because it gets me thinking about things. And you're asking about Paul Gauguin, and you've watched my videos about Paul Gauguin, which are about French Polynesia cruise, which out of Tahiti, which is without a shadow of a doubt, definitely one of the best trips I have ever done. And you've seen other reviews, the ship's getting old and it could be better. So basically, I do know the answer to the question. What they did during as you know, well, you may not know, but the Paul Gauguin company was bought just around pandemic time by Ponant. And they've announced two things, one of which, because of the pandemic, they were taking the ship out of service. They sent it to Asia, I think it was, if I remember correctly, and the ship has been completely revamped. So there's some very, very nice changes they've done to that particular ship. It looks really, really fantastic in the pictures that I've seen. So you're right, I probably, with that one's now, but I'll update the video I've got. And the second point I was going to make, which I've completely forgotten about, got completely thrown off there. Oh yeah, so those are 2 points, one of which is now been put out, and secondly, it's completely different. You know, personally, I think I didn't find the ship really tired and old. It has a lot of character. It's a pretty old ship, so it's always going to have slight quirkiness about it. What Ponant are going to be doing is they're going to be bringing on a second Ponant, a second Paul Gauguin ship, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether actually, as they bring that ship on, whether they actually phase out the existing Paul Gauguin. But definitely, if you're ever looking for a cruise to do that is really quite magnificent, that Paul Gauguin out of Tahiti, French Polynesian Islands, it's amazing. Also look at Windstar, they do a similar itinerary. And if you want to do something a little bit quirky, which I was desperately hoping to do, and I don't know when I'm going to get to do that now, is a company called Aranui. And Google that ship or YouTube that ship, and it's half cruise ship, half supply ship, and I think I've mentioned that before. Hetty, good to see you here again. Hetty, I know, has been wrestling with what about Antarctica season this year or not, so moved to January 2023 into 2022 on the Sapphire Princess. Feel more comfortable. I think, Hetty, this is a big challenge. I was talking again to the agent that I booked my Antarctica trip with, and it's all paid for because I've paid it during pandemic when we all thought things were going to move quicker. So I have that, and it's due to happen in November. I was talking to them again this week about how optimistic they are about the Antarctic season actually happening this year. And they were kind of, I think I might have mentioned this before I spoke to them, they were kind of like, we're not sure, we think it's going to happen. So that could be, a good idea to move it. At the moment I'm locked in, so I'm kind of waiting to see. I will have to make a decision in about 2 months' time, because I think flight is the only element that I actually haven't paid for yet. So that's really, really going to be interesting. Great mix of people. We've got people from Switzerland, Monica from Switzerland, Mark from Ohio, Amy Rogers made the actual live stream, which is great to see. Mary Elizabeth asking the $10,000, $20 million question is, do you think cruising will be as fun as it used to be post-COVID? The Mary Elizabeth, I've done, I'm not planning to do more of them, but I might. I'll see how it goes. I did a video based on, which you might have watched, which was after I went on the Viking cruise, the first post-COVID one, which sort of answers that question: is cruising, even when we're still under many COVID restrictions, as much fun? And I took a look, and I'd actually asked on the channel what people thought made a good cruise, and I structured the video around that because I thought it was really interesting. Because what a lot of people had focused on with sort of post-COVID cruising, certainly the ones now where there's still restrictions, is people had focused, not surprisingly, on the protocols. Do I wear a mask? Don't I wear a mask? Do I have to be vaccinated? Don't have to be vaccinated? Can I dine with other people, etc., etc.? All those kind of things. Can I go on shore excursions? But actually ask people what makes a great cruise, and actually the things that came up still exist kind of post-cruising. So if you're saying that it's about obviously switching off, if it's about relaxing, you can largely do that post-COVID, because a lot of restrictions mean you can still do a lot of stuff. It's about being at sea. Of course, you can still do that post-COVID. It's about meeting new people. And what I've found is, even with some of the restrictions, particularly as they're relaxing, is you can still meet new people. You can still dine with with new people that you meet. I still met new people on excursions. I still met new people around the ship. I still met people, at the theater or whatever. Now, in the ones I went, there was more social distancing still, but you could still engage with people. You can still have, great food. You can still have the entertainment more. So I think the cruising should be as much fun. And if anything, one of the things that could be interesting is that actually through the whole pandemic, some of the things which reduce risk, if you like, have actually been increased. So obviously we're used to, high levels of cleaning because of norovirus, but now with things like people being vaccinated, or if people aren't vaccinated, certain restrictions around what they can and can't do on the ship, more focus on what happens if there's an outbreak. Do we have quarantining cabins? Do we have relationships with places on land where we can get people into isolation if that's the rule? So I think those sort of things, they're actually even more locked down. And I think people have got a better sense of if something bad happens, what they can do. So actually, in some ways, you might be able to relax even more. The problem is we headed into the pandemic, it was pretty bad because people wouldn't let ships in and stuff. And I think they've resolved those issues. So I'm not sure if that's quite what you're asking, Mary Elizabeth, but I think many of the core fundamentals will be the same. And it's going to be interesting because I'm going to be going on a series of these post-COVID cruises. Now, I'm talking, when there's still restrictions, but I'm going to be going, this next one is still under the strict restrictions, but the next one I'm going on, which will now be Regal Princess, is after, certainly in the UK, we've moved to stage 4, where we'll get full confirmation soon, but mask wearing, social distancing, all that stuff is gone. Vaccine and testing is still in place. So it'll be interesting to see as that evolves if it's changed. So Scott is asking a question. My wife and I are looking to take a 15-day Hawaii cruise on Ruby Princess in October 2022. Should we book as early as possible or wait? So Scott, this is always a good question and a difficult question at the same time. If you're saying that you want to go on this cruise, and it sounds like a 15-day Hawaii cruise, sounds to me like it's a bit of a bucket list cruise, or it's a real must-do cruise. My approach to those cruises is I always book those early. And the reason I book those early is because I really want to do them. I might have a particular ship like Ruby Princess, or there's certain ports that I really want to do. And also, if it's such an important cruise, I'm probably really interested in the type of cabin I want. So whether it's a balcony cabin and the suites, inside, whatever type of cabin it is. And the earlier you book, the greater chance you will have to choose your cabin. And I certainly, as people who've watched my videos know, I really like to choose my cabin. I like to make sure that I've got a cabin which is going to be surrounded on all sides. I like to make sure that it's going to be in a good location, so it's not too near the stairs, for example. So I know that I'm going to have nice time to chill out if I want to chill out. I'm not going to be in noisy or high traffic areas, or I'm going to be high up on the ship, low on the ship, whatever. So certainly I would book those things early, because it sounds like, cruises to Hawaii, they're not that plentiful. There's not that many options you've got. So I would tend to book it early. What I would then do is keep an eye on the fares and see how they're trending. I suspect that on something like the Hawaii cruises, they will trend upwards. But keep an eye on the fares, because if fares do change, most cruise lines give you the option. It's not all cruise lines. I've had some people email me recently where they've had more challenges with Cunard, for example. But generally speaking, if you see fares go down and you haven't paid your final balance, if you contact the cruise line, and I think Princess is pretty good at this, and say, look, I've seen now my Ruby Princess in my balcony cabin on that cruise, you're now selling for $200 less. Can I get the lower fare, please? Or can I get some onboard credit or whatever? So you then have the option of kind of, if fares trend downwards, to take advantage of that. So I would tend to go early. So what I've done, for example, is there's a series of cruises that I really, really want to do. Now, I had some cruises which moved from 2020 into 2021 into 2022. So those I've sort of fitted in. But the cruises that I really, really wanted to do, I booked those really early and far in advance. So, for example, I really want to go on a Disney cruise because I haven't been on one and it kept getting posted. So I actually booked that right for the end of next year, because it was one that was sailing out of Dover. It went to the fjords that I want to do. So I booked those really far in advance. And Disney cruises tend to book out really quickly, and their prices do tend to go upwards rather than downwards. The other thing you could do is, of course, take the other alternative. That is, you say, okay, I'm going to wait till last minute and book whatever goes, because I'm prepared to take that risk. I think on a cruise like that, you're less likely to have, the cruise line's less likely to have excess capacity to do short minute, last minute cruises. So for example, I wanted to do, when I had my Valiant Lady cancelled, I'd had flights booked, which have been rolled over with vouchers and all sorts and whatever. And it's been changed like 3 times as things have changed. And I actually thought I really can't be bothered to change my flights again. I really wanted to go to the Caribbean in January. So I looked for another cruise, which was on Holland America. It's a very unusual cruise because it goes right down to the South Caribbean. It calls on islands they don't normally call on. So it's quite a popular cruise. They're only doing 2 of them next year. And I found, because I'm even booking now, still quite a few months before, I had relatively limited cabins left to choose from. So that hopefully has answered your question. It's sort of a long way of answering your question, but hopefully that's helped. Lou, good, thanks. I saw that you'd watched the Viking video. My video that came out this past Thursday was my video about Viking cruises. Sort of asking the question is, are big fans, like I guess Lou's a big fan of Viking, who kept telling me, go on Viking, was it as good as they said it would be? And you'll see during the course of that video what the positives were. And I talk a little bit some of the things that were less positive, which actually Lou and I in the notes that agreed. So Lou, I know his favorite. And if I remember correctly, you're going you're going to Alaska, I think. I can't remember. You told me the other day. And I think next doing Viking is your second cruise. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. The other thing I liked about Viking, coming back to Mary Elizabeth's question, is I really like the protocols that they have post-COVID. So they've taken an approach, which is the daily testing, which I know some people think is kind of intrusive, but actually I quite liked that, certainly as we head back, that kind of really kind of almost a strict layer. Strict layer, does that make sense? Question on Cunard. I always like asking questions on Cunard. You've said on Queen Mary 2 many times, I love the Queen Mary 2. Do you think that the special, sorry, I remember someone complained when I coughed into there. it gets a verbatim, and when I drink, it also verbatim, so sorry about that. You've said on Queen Mary 2 many times, do you think that the special dining for Britannia Club balcony stateroom is worth the extra charge over a regular Britannia balcony? And that's Taxati 1956. Now, I would say personally, my personal perspective is yes. I do think it is worth the premium, and I'll tell you why. Taxati, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, 1956. Why? It depends a little bit on the cruise and the length of the cruise. But the great thing about Britannia Club is you have open-seated dining. So although the menu is basically the same as in Britannia Club, you have that open-seated dining. So it means that you're not stuck in your first sitting or second sitting. Because the one thing that Cunard don't do, unlike Princess, Holland America, etc., they and Celebrity and most lines, they have a first sitting and a second sitting, and then they have that anytime dining where you basically go anytime you want to, different times of the day. Sometimes you have to book or you pitch up or whatever. But Cunard on Britannia don't have that option. So the thing is, if you're on a cruise, you're either dining early every day or late every day, and you maybe don't want to do that every day. So I really like the flexibility of being able to dine whenever I want to. You have the plus, though, that you normally, certainly Britannia Club, also have your regular table and the same staff. Now, I know that doesn't always work out quite that way, but, and also what I've found, generally speaking, with people who've gone to Britannia Club, is you're more likely to get your tables for 2 smaller tables if that's what you want. So I think it is worth the premium. Now, of course, if you're saying, I'm going on a week-long cruise, I want to eat late every day. I don't mind eating at the 8:30, so 8:30 or the 6:30, whatever. It doesn't that cruise. I don't really mind. Then you might argue it's not, but I do like that extra degree of flexibility. So that would be my view. It's really around that evening dining perspective, and the open-seated dining, I think is the key. Polly asking the question, do you think the mask will have to be worn outside in the future months? So at the moment, you don't have to wear masks outside on any of the cruise ships that I'm aware of, even those that have very strict mask wearing. So for example, all the ones in the UK at the moment, even though people are vaccinated, you still have to wear masks, but only inside, and you don't have to wear them outside. So I don't think that's likely to be the case, because I think all the studies, the CDC, the different health things everywhere are pretty comfortable, even with the Delta variant being more transmissible. So I would be very surprised. What I have noticed, though, which is interesting, is if you watch what's happening on, say, in Italy with the Italian lines versus, say, what's happening, the settings going on in the UK, what we're seeing, of course, starting up in the Caribbean and the US, is in the Italian lines, MSC, where they don't have the vaccine requirement, they just have the testing requirement. It's an antigen testing. Is I've noticed certainly with the people that I know that have been on those cruises and also talking to them, many, many more people wear masks outside. So that could be what you're referring to, Polly, is it's not required, but I've noticed people are wearing them much more. The one place, though, which I've just realized as I was talking, where you do have to wear masks still outside is on the cruises in Asia. So Polly, you might also be referring to those, where certainly on the Singapore sailings, which has been extended now right through to February next year, and I think also the Taiwanese sailings, and I think I'm right in the Japanese sailings as well, but I can't confirm, I can't remember 100%, is mask wearing outside is included on those. So again, those are unvaccinated cruises, so that is a good point. Bob and from San Diego, good morning. And I got a very nice message left from Bob, also who'd watched the Viking video. Very excited because they're him and Holly are heading off in 2 weeks' time on their Viking cruise. So it'd be great to know what they know. Okay, I hadn't seen this, Amy. This is good to hear. 2 unvaccinated passengers from Celebrity Edge just got kicked off the ship in St. Martin, apparently going outside the bubble for short excursions. People never learn. So I hadn't picked that up yet. I actually been a bit manic today. I was getting ready and I haven't actually been on social media, surprisingly for me this afternoon. So it's good to know that. I think you're right. The cruise lines are being phenomenally strict about the bubble excursions. I mean, at the moment, the cruises that I'm doing, you can only leave the ship on a bubble excursion, and they make it really, really clear. If you head out of in any form or format, you will be kicked off. So, for example, we went on one cruise or one excursion. We basically went to look at this castle, which is on it's called St. Michael's Mount, which is a very famous sort of castle structure, and off the coast near Cornwall, Dorset Way, and Cornwall. Why am I saying Dorset? Cornwall Way, and normally you'd stop in the town and you'd get quite close to it. We went to a car park, which was quite far away. So actually, it was a bit over there somewhere, so you didn't get that great pictures. And we were in this car park, and there's a little tea room, sort of a coffee, they were selling souvenirs, postcards, and they sold coffees and ice creams and stuff. And we were told very explicitly, you may not even go and buy a coffee. And if you do, basically, that's counted as breaking the bubble, and you will basically be kicked off. So really, really strict, and it's quite surprising. People are really, 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 really clear on that. So, and of course, what's interesting around what's happening in the Caribbean at the moment is depending on the island you go on, also is what the rules are. So I know on some of the cruises, not on Celebrity Edge, but some of the other cruises, which have gone to say Barbados, is even the vaccinated passengers on those cruises, because those were vaccinated only cruises, is they were allowed in some other places to get off the ship and self-explore, but in Barbados they had to go on bubble-only excursions because that was the rule in not only for the cruise line but also for the port. So it's almost like a double whammy, if you like. But I mean, it's good in some ways, and I guess the cruise lines want to make examples of those people. So it's good to know. It's good to know what's happening. Lioness Teresa, I don't know the answer to this. Do you know what's happening with Carnival Liberty? Nothing is posted until November, but they haven't posted my October cruise. I guess it's cancelled October cruise. So I don't know anything on Carnival Liberty. If anybody does know, it'd be great if you pop some stuff in there. I know people are pretty good to see the ones as post there. I see Lou referring to there. So I'm looking down here because I have also here on my iPad. I kind of keep a double trim. So Lou's saying that Tony of La Lido Loco had some video of the two being kicked off the ship, got it from 2 passengers on the ship. People can be real knuckleheads at some time. We're all very polite here. We don't use any 4-letter words. We use nice, descriptive, long words like knuckleheads, which is a great word. I like that. So if you want to actually see them getting kicked off, I'm going to see that Tony has some great update videos on stuff. He's really on the ball with those, and he posts shorts as well when news breaks. Yes, actually, another good channel for Bob I mentioned is Bob and Holly were posting post-pandemic lots of cruising videos. They also have a passion, like I do, a bit for trains. So actually, what they've been doing is posting lots of train trip videos. If you want to go and look at those, it's interesting to see how different people have tried to keep their kind of travel bug fed during the whole pandemic. So Cleopatra 561, have you heard about any problems with Oceania, Riviera, or Marina Bow? Supposedly now cruising in Europe, we embark through Rome from Monte Carlo to Rome. I hope everything is good. So no, I haven't heard any problems. I've heard basically everything sort of going to plan on that. So I haven't picked up anything. I'm not sure if you've heard anything else, but certainly I've heard no updates on anything being cancelled or postponed. I think I'm right saying Lou's also on Riviera, if I remember correctly, quite soon this year, if I remember correctly. But I haven't picked up anything that I've heard everything is fine. So if you've heard something specific, maybe leave a note and I'll see if I can come back to that. Paul asking, yes, I saw this, Paul. This is really interesting. So Marella are starting fly cruises from Corfu and Malaga in September. Do you think this is too early? So a lot of this, I guess, is hinging around. So Marella, for those of you who don't know, Marella is a very UK passenger-focused line. It used to be Thomson Cruises. It's part of the overall TUI Cruises group, but Marella is their sort of very specific UK spin-off, although there's actually also been some talk recently in some of the trade press about TUI Cruises sort of bringing Marella much more back in the fold. I don't know how the fold it is, but anyway, they are an all-inclusive line. They sail old Royal Caribbean ships, because obviously Royal Caribbean is a joint venture with TUI. TUI Cruises is a joint venture between Royal Caribbean and TUI. So they're old Royal Caribbean ships. I did see this, and it did strike me as being quite early, in that there's still a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, in the UK, they haven't officially, which we're waiting to see, lifted the ban for UK residents going on international cruises as a rule, although people are starting to go. So we've seen a couple of people join some of the Viking Malta cruises, some of the Viking Iceland cruises, partly because the Foreign Office lifted some of their restrictions about visiting the country. But if you look at the actual rule on cruising, the last time I looked, because they actually updated some of the ruling, international cruising is still not permitted. Now, I think that really applies to ships sailing out of the UK, which is why I guess they're doing fly cruise, because now people can get their travel insurance, because the Foreign Office has lifted the travel for only essential. You can't travel for non-essential reasons. September feels, to me personally, pretty early with everything that's going on, because of also the complexity. So if you're cruising, even if you're vaccinated, you're going to have to do some sort of test to get into those countries. Some of them, differing on the countries, are requiring either a PCR test plus vaccination proof. You then have to do a PCR test within 3 days of coming back. So you have to make sure that the cruise line, and I haven't checked on Marella if that's the case, have to provide some sort of capability for you doing a full PCR test, or I think it can be an antigen test as well. And then you have to do a PCR test within 2 days of coming back, which will have to be booked. So the logistics that are quite complicated. And then you've also got suddenly then changing the rules. So for example, Malta has just changed the rule where they said you can only come in if you're fully vaccinated, whereas before you could come in if you had a PCR test. So it certainly feels very early. It certainly feels very optimistic. However, saying that, we have seen Viking now starting up selling in Malta. We're obviously seeing selling out of Greece. We're seeing things like Celebrity Edge on America about to start, Seabourn starting. So certainly, those cruises in those specific areas, particularly in the Greece area, Greek islands, has been successful. Malaga is a separate question, and what happens with Spain. So it does feel early just because of the complications of doing it, but there is some precedent for it happening. Would I book foreign cruise at the moment? Personally, I've held back. A couple of people I know have actually cancelled cruises there and switched them to some of the UK ones. I'm actually due to do in October a Celestial cruise, which I'm still due to do. It's not a cruise; it's a cruise I've been asked to go and cover for Celestial. So a lot of it will hinge. So I haven't made the decision about paying, not paying. I've just got to see whether it's the right thing to do to travel at that time. So I guess Peter making the point about masks there. This is interesting. So Barleywine Are asking the question, which is around, are there any cruise lines that handle mobility impaired passengers better than others? My experience has been that the handicapped cabins are some of the worst on the ship. So Barleywine, it's been very interesting. I've had quite a few questions around this in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And so what I've committed to some people to do is to do much more detailed research. I do have a view, which I'll tell you about in a second, to do much more detailed research, to do a much more comprehensive overview of this whole area, and cover that in more detail, and really focus on some of the lines that did well. I think you're right. One of the things that I have seen is there is a lot of disparity between lines and ships, and who do it better and who do it worse. In my experience, coming to your point about some of the worst cabins, what you found is some of the newer ships. So I'd focus a lot on some of the newer ships. So even if you're looking at a cruise line like Holland America, or you're looking at Princess, or any of those cruise lines, or even once you get into, depending on the great type of cruise line you want to go, Royal Caribbean, whatever, is I would always focus on the newer ships. Because on the newer ships, they have actually generally been designed, partly because rules are changing, laws are changing, and expectations, I think, of what's the right thing to do to cater for different traveler groups is, the awareness of that's much higher. So we're seeing these new ships coming out with a couple of things targeting people. So solo cabins is one example. So Holland America, for example, on their new ships like Stattendam, the Westerdam, and I guess Rotterdam, which is imminent, coming out very, very, very soon. They built in things like, they have 12 solo cabins, but they also have spent much more time thinking about, cabins, particularly for mobility impaired, wheelchair cabins. And a lot of them will have them through differing grades, because you're right, in some older ships, I think I'm right in saying, but don't quote me 100% on this, but when I've been on some of the older ships, you might get mobility impaired cabins that are good for wheelchairs, but they're only perhaps one grade. So you can only pretty much get, inside cabin or whatever. So focus on new ships. Focus on lines, this is going to sound a bit ageist, but also focus on lines that tend to have a slightly older demographic, because those cruise lines are often a little bit more adept or have more experience at dealing with mobility of all, varying types, whether it's literally wheelchair mobility or just people that need walkers or whatever, or to walk with. So they tend to be a little bit better. So if you take a look at Holland America, if you take a look at Princess, Cunard, for example, really, really good at handling mobility. I've actually stayed because I booked once a guaranteed cabin, and we actually got allocated what they call a Q7 cabin, which is for mobility impaired. And it was actually almost like a supersized cabin. So it was a Queen's Court cabin. So it was certainly in their top level, Queen's Court, Princess Royal Britannia, actually Britannia Club Britannia. But it was, so it was a top-notch cabin. It was really big. Now, the video I've got, if you want to take a look at it, it's still up on my channel, but they've revamped, the decor is much, much better. But if you actually search on my channel, if you search Cunard Queen's Court cabin or Cunard Q7 cabin or something like that, it will come up. So the decor will have changed. You'll see the decor's changed a lot, but the basic layout you'll see. So it's got good size, good layout on the room, and certainly the bathroom was really big with like a wet room and stuff. But anyway, so focus on new ships, focus on ships that tend to have a slightly older demographic, and also to a degree, focus on slightly bigger ships, so mid-sized to large ships. So a lot of those I've spoken about, whether it's Cunard or American Princess, their ships are mid to large size, because also, again, they tend to have space and room to have those sort of cabins in. And then we were talking here about ocean. So certainly once you get into river, it's a whole nother problem. And I don't really recommend river cruising for mobility, not only because of the ships themselves, but also the places that they call on. You're getting on often very steep river banks, lots of cobbled streets, and that kind of stuff. So so those are some initial thoughts, but I will definitely commit to doing more. I would certainly focus on those lines that I've mentioned. Now, celebrity, I'm trying to remember now. On the celebrity ships I've been on, celebrity ships I've toured, I'm not 100% sure on those, on celebrity, but I would certainly look at celebrity as well. The other thing that I've noticed, if you take a look at some of the ships like Cunard and stuff, often they will then have the facilities, the kind of the winch things on at least one of the pools to help people in and out of pools. What we've seen say on Saga, for example. That's a UK. I don't know if you're UK based, but if you're UK based, Saga is a great one to look at. They are really well catered. They have a lot of accessibility cabins, and what they also have, which is interesting, is they have quite a few accessibility cabins which also have a cabin next door with an interconnecting door, so a non, sort of a regular cabin, if that's the right way to put it. So if people are traveling, so people with mobility issues are traveling with somebody, they can also be right there to be helpful for them as well. So Saga is a really good one. In the pool, they have a very slow sloping sort of step area to get in and out of the pool. So that's another one. So hopefully that's been enough to answer. And as I said, I will definitely kind of dig into that. So Elaine raised about the cruise lines are doing antigen tests, but if you're Canadian, that will not be acceptable for re-entry into Canada. You need a PCR test to get a test done somewhere else before returning home. Elaine's making a really, really good point. You need to check very carefully with what the cruise lines are giving you to get back in. Now, line by line do it kind of differently, and some of them are being kind of reflecting the passenger mix, knowing the type of test that they need to do. But Elaine's right, is in the majority of cases, it's an antigen test that's being used, partly because they're, I guess, more inexpensive, they're quicker, because it's like 20 minutes, half an hour to get a result, and you need a laboratory to do them. PCR test need a laboratory. So that's a really important test. You need to make sure that it's the right type of test in the cruise line if you're going on. And if they're not, this is something I was looking at actually, for my Antarctic cruise if it ever happens, because I would need a test to get back into the UK, which has to be verified. It can't just be a self-administered one. And the problem is I realized is I need, because I don't think, unless Penart are going to give me that specific test, I would have to add in some extra days afterwards to be able to do a proper PCR test, or the type of test is needed to get back into the UK. So really good watch out on that. Make sure you know very specifically. And the other point is coming back to the question that I guess was Mary Elizabeth, someone asked earlier about will things be different? The thing you also need to bear in mind is these rules change all the time. And also, even when you're on a cruise, they can change, because we're seeing, countries go from green to red, they're going whatever. So they're chopping change. So just looking here, it looks like my video had frozen on there, but I don't know if that's my laptop or whether it's the actual show. So I saw a couple of questions saying, thanks very much, congratulations. Mary Elizabeth saying on the 200,000 subs, and the JM saying, have a contest on whoever picks the closest day for reaching the 300,000. It was very exciting to get to 200,000, especially since I think I added something during the pandemic of like 50,000 subscribers, which is phenomenal when there was no cruising, which was very exciting. So the next battle, of course, is to get to 300,000. So hopefully that will come quicker and quicker and quicker. So I should have a contest for picks the closest day. That's a good idea. That's a bit depressing if I suddenly discover it takes me 5 years to get there. So that's good. So here's another question, which is Marilyn Belk-Jones: why cruise lines don't allow dogs on the ship? So the only line that you can take pet animals rather than a guide dog animal is Queen Mary 2, and that's only on the transatlantics. And I think I might have mentioned before, and I've done a video about it before, is actually it can often cost you more to have your dog cross the Atlantic than your cabin may cost you, depending on the grade that your cabin. So you're right, they don't allow dogs, and that's for a couple of reasons, I guess. A lot of them are to do with the regulations of taking animals between countries is one issue. The second issue is I think they're just actually concerned about, they don't have the facilities, they have to have all sorts of facilities, walking dogs, and then doing where they do their business and all that kind of stuff. And then I guess it's general sort of concerns around hygiene and annoying passengers and stuff. But a lot of it's to do with regulations. It's quite difficult moving dogs very easily between countries and ports and things, which is why Queen Mary 2, you can only do it when you're heading from Southampton to New York, because there's only one country and then there's all those arrangements. I actually did a video on this very topic, which was actually one of the worst performing videos I've ever done. I've had two in the last 2 years. Interesting enough, I've had two videos that did really, really badly, that basically no one really wanted to watch. And the problem is if no one watches it early on, then YouTube never suggests them to anybody, so no one ever sees them. one of which was around the environment and what cruise ships are doing on the environment, which was interesting. Nobody really wanted to watch that. And secondly I've done a video around if you want to take a pet, what are your options? And in that one, Marilyn, I also talk a little bit about how cruise lines have clamped down on the definition of service dogs. So before, you could take support dogs with you, or dogs, I guess those dogs that sort of can tell you when to take medication or when your blood sugar's low. And some of the cruise lines have really pushed down on those. So it's almost the only ones you can take are guide dogs, where you are, and I know it differs by country, but in some countries you're registered blind or visually impaired. Some countries you don't have the thing. So it's, even by line, it's restricted on the type of dogs. I've been on all the cruises I've been on. I have been on very, very few cruises where I've seen a dog on board. So I've been on 80 cruises. My next one's the 81st cruise I'm doing. And of those, I've seen animals on the Queen Mary 2 crossings, and I've seen maybe on 2 other cruises dogs on board, and they were both for visually impaired people. But anyway, watch that video. That will tell you much more of that. So so Andrew's saying, I've watched both those videos. Maybe Andrew, were you one of the few people maybe that watched those 2 videos? If so, thank you. I don't know if that's what you're referring to. And someone, I'll come back to that. People are talking about the funnels. Let me talk about the funnels. Interestingly, there's actually a really interesting video. So Normandy had candles on the 3rd funnel, and many other translators had candles. I'm not sure what that means, but talking about the funnels, I'm guessing I skipped a thing. So very interesting. There's Chris Frame, who many of you may not have heard of, but Chris Frame is an Australian guy. He lives near Perth, Australia, and he has a channel which is called Chris Frame, but he's sort of like a maritime historian. He's making more and more video, and he talks on things like Cunard ships, but obviously he's now sort of locked in prison, as it were. Not literally locked in prison, but in Australia they're kind of, they're not letting anyone in, and now they've got the Delta variant, and they're not letting people, they're under lockdown. But basically he makes really interesting videos which are about the sort of things that happen on ships, and he tells lots of stories about the funnels that they had on ships, and how many of the funnels were fake, because actually it was at one time seen as the number of funnels you had was almost like a status symbol, and sort of represented your prestige and your power. But in many cases, either only 1 funnel or 2 funnels were actually needed. So those funnels were dummy funnels, and I guess that's where they had lots of different things. And as we've probably seen in, I guess you might be referring to the new Disney ship, they have this big glitzy cabin that's going to be in one of those funnels. Patricia's asking, have you done a video on Celebrity Silhouette? I haven't, but I will do once I've been on Celebrity Silhouette next month. So I'm on Celebrity Silhouette. I can't remember, it's middle of August. On my site, I have a list of all when I'm going. So I will have done one. I've done one on the Celebrity Equinox. No. Celebrity Solstice, I think it was. Anyway, one of the same class of ships I have done when I did a Caribbean cruise. However, Silhouette, I guess what you're referring to is because they have then been done, they've been through that whole revamp side. So I'm really interested to see that between new cabins and upgrades. So no, but I will be doing one after, so towards the end of next month, I'll be done in one. It's not going to help you if you're going to be on Celebrity Silhouette soon and you want to see what it looks like. Someone asking the question around, I'm guessing it's a question, yes, here we are. This is RBN making those emotional support animals, often the people's pet. The airlines are clamping down on that too. So you're right, that's why they're clamping down. I think one of the first ones to clamp down that was Royal Caribbean. So that's there. I'll answer Andrew's question. I'll come back with some questions around P&O, which I'll come back to in a second. Andrew asked, how did I start cruising? One of the things that people ask me that quite often, one of the things I probably should do is make a video more around how I started cruising and how I ended up doing what I'm doing and how what I'm doing works now. So basically, the way that I started cruising was, I was like most people, I'm guessing most people who are here who now love cruising. I'd always thought that cruising was not for me, that all those stereotypes that I'd find I was trapped, that it was all full of old people, boring people, non-adventurous people. What would I do, etc., etc. So I got into cruising. I was actually asked to go and talk at a conference on a cruise ship. So a company which I don't think exists anymore, called Richmond Events, used to charter every year a ship a number of times, and they would run conferences. So my background was marketing. So I was in the marketing field working for Johnson & Johnson, and they would run this marketing conference where they get all the marketing directors and agencies together, and they would run a conference, and then basically there would be meetings, meetings where suppliers would sell. Anyway, so I got asked to go and talk on it, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll go and do that. And then I got on the ship, and then after the first 12 hours, 24 hours being on the ship, I phoned my partner and said, phone. I couldn't have phoned because it was all at sea day. Must have messaged my partner, whatever you did in those days in 2005. Emailed probably is the best I could do in those days. Emailed and like I said, we're going on a cruise. We're absolutely going to, when I come back, I got back on the Saturday or the Sunday whenever I got back, we got out the brochures. That was the day you got out your brochures. And we booked a cruise, and we booked the Queen Elizabeth crossing straight after that. So that's how I got into cruising, was someone made me go on a cruise. And that's the thing I keep saying to people is, go on a cruise. Once you're on a cruise, it will really do. So Philip is asking, they've just switched from the Queen Elizabeth to the P&I own a maiden voyage. This is our first P&O cruise. What are your top tips for things we should do? So I'm guessing from what you're saying, Philip, is it's not your very first cruise. It's your first cruise on Iona. Iona is obviously for people who don't know as well, Iona it's the biggest ship that P&O, so P&O, which sails out of the UK, it's their biggest ship they've ever had in the UK. It's a pretty bold move because I think it's 5,000 passengers or something, and they're going to have to be filling that ship when they've already got some other big ships. Anyway, the Iona is basically, it's a huge big ship with lots of facilities on. I'm trying to remember, it's exactly the same ship as, and I can't remember, one of the other Carnival group have exactly the same ship, basically. And I can't remember for the life of me what it is. It'll come back to me. So what I would do, the thing I would actually recommend, Philip, is not having been on an owner specifically, but what I would do is I would, as the minute you get on board, I would just basically work the ship and figure out everything that's on there, all the facilities that are on there, all of the dining options. They have a gin distillery. I would literally spend your afternoon, depending on what time you get on, is just working, get the deck plan, figure out everything that's on that ship. Now, if I'm right in saying, the advantage you've got with the maiden voyages, I think it's a 7-night voyage and it's all sea days, if I remember correctly. They then go to much shorter voyages. So you actually have the luxury of much more time. So one of the things I always do when I get on a new ship is that. But I think particularly important is you have an advantage because it's all sea days. You're on a brand new ship with lots of facilities. And then I would basically draw up all the things that you want to do and figure out how you're going to do them across the 7 days that you're doing. Now, you're going to have much more time than people would normally do. So linked to that, of course, is what they're going to offer. Now, I can't remember the date, whether it's past, I think it's past the unlocking. So much more things will be open than normal because they're going to have more people on board and facilities will be open. So I'd really focus on all those things that Iona has that you really, really, really want to do. One of the things I would think about on Iona, being your first time on P&O, is try some of the specialty restaurants that they've got on board. They are kind of an extra cost, but again, you're going to have sea days and lots of time. But I would try this because they do have some kind of interesting dining options. So on Britannia, I'm actually not going to do them because I've done them when I've been on Britannia before. Although once on board, I might change my mind. The other thing that I would do, so that's when you get on board. But what I would actually do before you get on board is also work out what you think you're going to do. Because what P&O have, which is kind of frustrating with all these voyages, is you can't book. The only things you can book in advance at the moment, anyway, is the entertainment. And they have an app. They call it an app, but it's not a real app. It's basically when you get on board, there's basically kind of a web-based thing that you can use to then start booking dining options and all spa and all that stuff. So at the moment, it's a bit clunky. You can't pre-book. So before you go, if there's anything that you know that you really want to do, get ready to book that when you get on board. But that's why I'd spend the afternoon, check out what you want to do, get on that app and book it. So almost maybe even as you're going around, kind of book as you want to go. So those I think would be the main things that I would focus on. So hopefully that helps. So let's have a look. Someone talking about Virgin. Yeah, Chef's Table on Viking. I would definitely recommend Chef's Table. And they normally on Viking have 2 or 3 different menus. So the Asian menu, which is really good, the bridge menu, which I guess is, I don't know if they do that all the time, it tends to be more bridge focused than California, but definitely it's worth, if you can, go to multiple evenings. Thank you, David. It's the same as Carnival Mardi Gras. I just couldn't remember. So Iona is exactly the same ship as Carnival Mardi Gras. So they're the same ship, and the decor and stuff's slightly different. So Heather's asking, what newly built ship are you most looking forward to cruising on? The one I'm most looking forward to cruising on, Heather, is the Sivler Origins, which has just actually come into service. So I've actually just, in the last week, booked a Galapagos cruise on Sivler Origins for November next year. That is the one I'm most excited about for 2 reasons. One, because both the Sivler Origins and I looked at Celebrity Flora, which has just come into service now, that they were built a little bit a while ago, these are kind of new concept ships for the Galapagos. So they're very modern. They're kind of trying to be much more eco, and they're just very interesting kind of ships. And it's in the Galapagos, so it's sort of linked to, these are ships which have been very specifically designed for a very specific part of the world. That's the one that I personally am most done. Although I guess in reality it's sort of it's not. I mean, it is a new build, but they're kind of finished. That's probably the one. And the other one, which again is sort of something that's really been so I haven't yet tried the Edge class of ships. Although again that's been out, that's the one that I'm also really keen to try, because I've seen very mixed views on that ship and how it works and how it doesn't work. And so I'm also really keen on that ship. So those are the ones that I'm most keen on. The other one, which again I'm very interested in seeing how that goes, is the Ritz-Carlton yacht collection, or whatever they call it. I'm also very interested again because it's a whole new concept. So obviously I'm interested in things like the Rotterdam and all those kind of ships, but they're kind of the same. So the ships I'm most interested in are the ones that are kind of slightly different. So for example, the other one that I really want to go on is one of the hybrid ships. So like one of the, which I was due to go on, but it got cancelled because of COVID, surprise, surprise. But some of the Hurtigruten, some of their hybrid ships are also ones that I'm really keen. So it's kind of ships that are sort of different, are the ones that I'm most, the ones that I'm most keen on. So it'll be interesting. So Lou's doing are you doing Celebrity Flora there? So that was the one I was looking at, is the Flora and the Origins, and then eventually a couple of things on Origin kind of switch it there. So I guess Christy making the same point. My first and only cruise was forced, an annual girls trip, and I got outvoted. Then the pandemic hit. So I think that's the thing, is getting people getting on board and discovering it is really really the thing. You've just got to get people on, and a lot of times it's mistakes. Then someone asking about t-shirts of this. Where do you get your cruise t-shirts, Jason? So I'll do a plug there. Someone's done it for me, so I'd rather be cruising this one. So Jason, yeah. So I have a series of t-shirts. I originally did them so it's just so I could have them to wear here, and I just had them. So I put them on Teespring. So you're right. So if you look below, if you're watching on your phone, it won't make any sense. If you're watching the video on browser, on every single video there's a little strip that comes up below there. Also, if you look in the product description, you'll see a link. It says buy my t-shirts or something like that, something creative like that, and that'll take you to a little store, which actually probably is slightly more than the YouTube show. And if you're watching on your phone, if you turn your phone up that way and then look at the description thing, they should come up. But yeah, I'll do a bit of a plug for that. Thank you for Thank you for asking. Thank you for plugging. KASCAPADES. I'm launching my cruise vlog this weekend. Very exciting. What is your biggest piece of advice for a newcomer? Wow, the biggest piece of advice I would have for a newcomer making vlogs is think really carefully about who you're making it for and what you're bringing that's unique and different. That I would really focus on. So focus on who you're making for, because I'm guessing you're making them because you want people to watch them and enjoy them. That would be the biggest piece of advice. You know, there are so many blogs. I've got a list. So send me a note or leave me a comment with a link to blog. I've got on my website a list of all the vlogs that I know of, and in there I just basically about every quarter update with subscriber numbers, which is public, view numbers, which I can get via Social Blade, and then which country they're based in, and link so people can go and find it. So send me a link, and because I tried to add up, there's something like there's 55 or 56 that I'm aware of, and I put those on there if they're probably 90% of their comment cruising. So my point is there are a lot of vlogs there. So think a lot about who it's for and what's different. So the example I gave, you know, for example, on Viking Venus, there was David from Cruise Show UK, there was Ben and David, there was Richard and Helen from Visit Us, and there was me, and it was at least 4 sets of people. On MSC Virtuosa, which had been before, there was, I don't know, 10 probably bloggers and bloggers on there. So bear in mind, the point is, assume that's, you know, from that trip, 4 different people are going to make content. So think about what are you doing that's unique and different. And the second thing is look how long people watch your videos for, because that's the thing that YouTube do. So I have loads more tips, but those are 2 things I would do. Focus on your audience, and then once you've got videos up, look who's watching and how long they're watching for. So hopefully that helps. I'll do another stuff, and I think you're awesome. Thank you very much. I'm just curious, where are you from? So that's another question I get asked, and I probably don't do enough of that. So basically, I grew up in Zimbabwe, and I left Zimbabwe after school, and then I've been living in London now. I lived in South Africa for a brief period of time, and then I've been living in London now for 30-something years. So if you're asking, because you're picking up a slight accent, so that's my background. So Lou is subscribed to over 100 cruise vloggers, and there are about 10 that are great, and others just for occasional info. So yeah, so my list is clearly not quite complete yet. So there's a lot of those. So let me head back. Norfolk Boy is asking a question which I would love to know the answer to, because I'm desperately hoping they do. Do you think Viking will extend their UK cruises into September? I don't know if they will, and I guess a lot of that will hinge around what happens with their Malta cruises, because they have quite a lot of capacity in Malta. So whether they actually look at that. So as you probably know, they've added just recently in the last week officially, they're on sale now, 2 cruises in August, which weren't scheduled. And I guess if they keep selling and they have ships around, I can't see why they shouldn't, particularly if Scotland opens, because if Scotland opens, it gives them, for cruise ships, it gives them a whole different itinerary. At the moment, they're really hamstrung around basically having to go as far as Liverpool. They do scenic cruising, the one I did right up into Scotland. But if they can start calling into Scotland, I think, I would not be surprised at all if they do that. But we don't know. I'm hoping they do, because certainly in September, I would, with some of the cruises being cancelled, I would love to do that. So Marilyn said the same thing about Queen Elizabeth. Due to summer the 26th, due to disembark. It is really, really disappointing. But I guess that's the key, is they've got to do what they've got to do. I mean, personally, I think it was quite a surprise that with all the protocols that they still ended up having people with COVID, because the testing, the protocols, even talking to the crew. So something kind of didn't go quite right. So actually, the fact they're cancelling for a period of time, when they figure that out, is probably a great thing. Tara Destranger, thank you very, very much for I guess that's a super chat, I think it's called there. Thank you very, very much for that feed. Wow, so already, an hour's kind of has zoomed by. People talking a lot about Tony and Emma and stuff, so the different vloggers there. But if you want to see more vloggers, I don't have the full 100 that Lou does, but if you're looking for our vloggers, this is on my website, tipsfortravelers.com, travelers with 2 L's. There's a thing called Top Cruise Vloggers or something where I have a list of those. If you see any that you really like that I'm missing that list, just add it in the comments, and then I will add those. A lunatic kamikaze, can you take your motorcycle on board? The answer to that is probably not. The only time that I've ever seen motorcycles allowed on board is when it's a themed motorcycle cruise. But certainly, contact before you book cruise lines. You're almost certainly going to find the answer is no. But your one option is, of course, motorcycle themed cruises. They do, but that's going to be a challenge indeed. The one exception to that may be if you're doing something like a full massive big world cruise where they do let people bring kind of slightly crazy things on. Thanks so much. The hours zoomed by. Loads of great questions, which I really appreciate. As I mentioned, I will be on a cruise tomorrow, Pinot Britannia. So if you do want to keep up to date with that, I will be posting some stories on YouTube, but I certainly post much more stories on Instagram because I can do a bit more, but certainly watch the stories for those. Next Saturday, there will not be a live stream next Saturday because I will be away, but not on a cruise. But I won't do one on Saturday, and I don't think I'll be able to do one on Sunday, but there's a small chance I'll be able to squeeze one on Sunday, but there will not be one on Saturday, but keep an eye out and see if there will be one on Sunday, which I definitely will try and do if I possibly can. Thanks for all your good wishes. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for your great questions. I have a video coming out tomorrow evening if you want even more. So watch the Viking video, another video coming out tomorrow evening, which I won't tease. I'll just let you wait and see what that is. Thanks very much. Take care, and happy sailing if you're sailing, happy booking if you're booking.